This is an introductory section to the entire show and the seminar. Just want to point out that each one of these framed images are actually expanded throughout the gallery. And down here in front we have things that are related to the concepts that I work with in my paintings, my drawings, and my illustrations. Actually, I'm not really a sculptor, but I did spend a lot of time working in art bronze foundries and assisted other artists in doing castings. And this is the one casting that I've done, and I love it. It's beautiful. I did it in Shadoni Art Foundry in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's supposed to be a still life based on ideas that Occam has about nominalism. That's why I put the plant there. You can see the relationship between nature and art. And also, the thing about art is that visual art is either a window into another world or it's a mirror of the world we are in. And so a lot of my paintings are based on a window and on a mirror that reflect different images in a kaleidoscopic fashion. The other thing I work off of in my fine art is the grids system. I use a 4-block grid system in my drawings and my paintings. This is the book that I've been working on, and it's a palimpsest. The word palimpsest comes from the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, books were very rare, and they were handmade on vellum and parchment, which is from animal skins. And when a book was no longer viable, they would scrape it off and put another book on top of that. So we have what's called a palimpsest. And a lot of my works are these transparencies, grid transparencies, that show layers of text and images on top of each other. And so the title of the book, which is actually where all the paintings and drawings come from, is called Occam's Looking Glass. This is a very good example of the idea of the grid system, which I will talk about in the seminar coming up on this Saturday. But these are much larger paintings, and the interesting thing that I do is these paintings can become a multitude of different compositional arrangements because each panel can be removed. You can place one in a different position. And when you change the position, you change the whole meaning of the painting. And so therefore, the audience can actually participate in the creative process by moving these panels around. So we have some examples of those panels in the grid system. The other thing I'm interested in is the relationship between word and image. Obviously, if I'm an illustrator and I'm illustrating text, I have to be very aware of the text. My art cannot dominate the text. It has to enhance the text. So I'm very interested in the relationship between word and image. And this is something that also Wittgenstein was very interested in. He referred to it as the language game. And he said that we play a language game every day of our lives, and language is very much a part of our lives. And as I'm a visual artist, but I'm also a literary person, I write and I publish. And so I like the relationship between word and image. A lot of the larger paintings come out of studies that I do that are much smaller, but still on the grid system. And I will do a whole study in black and white. The black-white study, there's a French term for it. It's called a grisaille. A grisaille is to do an entire study in black, white, and gray, and then actually to paint over top of that with color. And a lot of artists have done that kind of relationship between the ground and the finished painting. So I have sets of these, and you'll notice that these smaller images are related to the bigger paintings. I've also recently begun to experiment with different ways of positioning the paintings. These are actually portraits done by the famous French painter Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. They are 4 countesses that were very popular, particularly in Paris, in the 1820s during the Empire period when Napoleon was emperor. And so these are 4 images all coming together in a kind of the grid pattern, but now in a diamond shape. So I've kind of reoriented the portraits. These are a continuation of the same grid system that I'm talking about. These are much earlier ones that started me on the track that got me to where I am today. So these are much earlier attempts at it. And in those, at that time, I was doing them in pairs rather than in a perfect square. But it led eventually to the larger square images. Now these are also studies. I have so many sketchbooks. One of the things that I do is I make sure I draw every day. I've been doing this since I was 5 years old, and it's important for me to draw every day. And this Saturday, I'm going to introduce to the audience a studio experiment. I'm going to be asking everybody in the audience to do some drawing. I'm a firm believer that it's one thing to talk about art, it's something else to make art. And art is something you make, you do, you perform, you experience. It isn't just something that you go into a museum and say, oh, I love this Vincent van Gogh or whatever the artwork is. But no, it has to be, you have to get your hands dirty. Even if you don't think you're talented, do it. Matter of fact, Picasso has a wonderful saying. He said that every human being is born an artist. The trick is staying one the rest of your life. These are individual studies out of sketchbooks that then eventually lead into finished paintings. I'm also very interested in film and photography, and I do use photography and film in some of my artwork. I actually set up my DVD and my screen, and I photograph off of the screen, and I use those images. And what I've done, this is from a film by Alain Resnais, a very famous French film director, and it's called Last Year at Marienbad. And I've done the paintings and the frames out of the film. And what I've done is I've taken language in the film, not necessarily to fit that particular image, but these are script out of the actual films that are then associated, kind of like I did in the painting with the, where I have the red, violet, and the blue-green words in the painting. Here you have what in a film would be subtitles, because the film is in French, and you would have English subtitles. So I'm very interested in film as a visual image. One of my lifetime projects is to do an illustrated autobiography. It's called Thrice Told Tales. On my mother's side of the family, I'm distantly related to Nathaniel Hawthorne. Nathaniel Hawthorne, the writer, New England writer, when he started out, couldn't get his works published. He wrote a lot of short stories. When he finally started getting published, the publisher said, why don't you collect all these short stories together under one cover? So the title of that book is Twice Told Tales. As a kind of memorial to my being a cousin to Nathaniel Hawthorne, I'm doing it called Thrice Told Tales, which is my life. So I'm illustrating my life, and I'm up to when I went off to boarding high school, and I'm about a third of the way into my life, and I'm still working on it. I'm the oldest of 8 children, and I have a middle sister, Barbara Ann Werenko, and she is a children's book writer. She writes stories based on what's called the elf in the tree. She lives up in the mountains of Tennessee, and she has 3 granddaughters who come down from New York City to visit her, and she tells them these stories about this elf in the tree. So I said to my sister a few years ago, would you like me to illustrate your books for you? She said, oh, I'd love it. So I'm now illustrating my sister's books. She's done 4 of them, and she's looking for a publisher right now. But it's called Grandma Chloe and the Old Elfin Tree. And these are my illustrations for her books. Also, a little sidelight story. This little angel, we call her series Little Angel Books. When she was 5 years old, she contracted pneumonia and almost died. I was 10 years older than her. When she got out of the hospital, I was taking art classes, and I made a little wooden angel. And I gave it to her, and I inscribed it for her birthday on the back, and she still has it today. So we called the series of books Little Angel Books. Also, because my undergraduate degree is in English, and one of my first loves is the English language, obviously my interest in Wittgenstein and language, but also poetry. And one of my first encounters that I loved was T.S. Eliot. As a matter of fact, I loved it so much that I named my son, his middle name is Eliot, after T.S. Eliot, Thomas Stearns Eliot. So I am in the process of getting publishers interested in me doing complete editions of all of his works and me illustrating them. And this is one of the first ones, which is The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. And it's a 100th anniversary illustrated edition. And I've had several publishers reviewing this. I'm illustrating the actual poems itself. Another illustration project I'm working on is actually a research project with a professor from Texas Tech University here in Lubbock. His name is Jorge Morales. He is a quantum chemist, brilliant man. He's from Argentina. He was knew Jorge Borges, the famous Argentinian poet. So we're doing an interdisciplinary article, and we're analyzing the world's largest fresco mural by Giambattista Tiepolo, which is in Würzburg, Germany, at the Treppenhaus. And I'm illustrating the book. The book is called The Fly in the Bottle, which is a phrase from Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein said that his purpose in the philosophy was to let the fly out of the bottle. So we're doing an interdisciplinary analysis: mathematics, literature, poetry, theater, music, visual art. We're doing an interdisciplinary analysis of this very important fresco. The next book, which I've been working on for about 8 years, and I've completed it, and I'm looking for a publisher, it's called Classic Pinups Through the Ages. As a professor of art, I used to teach figure drawing and painting from the male and female figure. And the female figure in art is ubiquitous. Every museum you go into, you're going to see the female figure in art. So I did a study over 20,000 years of the female figure in art. And I used the title Classic Pinups because I wanted to deal with both high and low art. Pinups is a kind of a low art. Classic is a high art idea. So I combined the two together, and it goes back 20,000 years up to the present. And it's an artistic look historically at the female figure in art. I went to 32 museums in Europe and the United States and did all the drawings for the book from the original artworks themselves, and did all the research on the text itself that is part of the book. It's actually an art college textbook is what it is. And you can't self-publish this kind of book because it requires too much graphic design layout. Publisher has to want to publish this because it's costly to produce. But anyway, I have finished the book and I'm waiting on a publisher for that. And these are the paintings. The part of this was that I had a model, and I had the model pose with 12 other images of famous pinup models of the 20th century. So what you have here is you have my model, Christine Gustafsson, with another model. And so we have individual models, Anita Egberg, for example, and others posing with my live model. So there are the 12 color images. The rest of the book is all black and white. And one last part of this particular book is, this is what I call a contemporary Renaissance Venetian atelier. An atelier is the way artists 200 years ago and earlier would be trained. An artist would set up a studio called an atelier, and students would come and contract with the artist to learn how to paint. Then they would get into the salon in Paris, for example. So what I put here is the process that I go through to actually make these oil paintings that you've just seen over here. This is my model, Christine Gustafsson. She wrote a statement to go into the book saying how pleased she was as a model to be part of such a project like this. These are the individual bios of the various pinup women that I used in conjunction with my model. Thank you very much. Now that we've made the tour of the gallery and all the artwork, and you know now what this presentation is going to be, I want to remind everybody that the presentation will be June 14th, 2025, here at the Garden and Arts Center in Lubbock, Texas, which is at 44th and University Boulevard. So we welcome you all. First-time attendance at these events is for free. And we do have a membership fee if you'd like to join the Caprock Writers and Illustrators Alliance.